Pachai Vu along with his personal lieutenant Zhongzhi Lo, led their Hmong troops to attack the Hmong at Nong Het, and forced the Hmong leaderships at Nong Het to abandon Nong Het during the war. Zhongzhi Lo deliberately tried to kill Lo Blayo, which was his very own uncle. Zhongzhi Lo was born in Nong Het, and grew up in Nong Het, and was the nephew of Li Blayo. During the road construction from Nong Het to Vietnam, Zhongzhi Lo was put in charge of the Hmong labor team under the French supervision, and Zhongzhi Lo, being a corrupted man, did not pay the Hmong labor. That ultimately caused the Hmong labor to refuse to continue with the road construction. Lo Blayo punished his nephew, and banished him from Nong Het. After being banished from Nong Het, Zhongzhi Lo settled in Dien Bien Phu, and later joined Pachai Vu fight against the French and the ethnic Thai. By 1920, Pachai Vu had the combined force of the Hmong in Vietnam and in Laos. The French stated that the Hmong rebellion was at its peak in 1920, and the conflict covered a territory of 40,000 square kilometers, spanning from Dien Bien Phu in North Vietnam, to Nam O and Luang Prabang, Laos, down south to Muang Cha, now renamed Saisambaon, and going northeast to Sam Noa. The French brought in 4 additional companies of native troops from other part of Indochina to help defeat Pachai Vu. It was one of the largest military expeditions in colonial Indochina up to that point. By 1921, the French pacification strategy started to affect the Hmong people from forced displacement into internment camps, to execution of Pachai Vu supporter, and burning of Hmong farm crops. When food and weapons became scarce along with casualties began to mount, morale among Pachai Vu supporters began to decline rapidly. Pachai Vu, personal lieutenant Zhongzhi Lo, was betrayed by his own father-in-law, and he was executed by the French. Meanwhile, Pachai Vu, First Lieutenant Phaya Chan, surrendered to the French, while Lieutenant Lao Sing was captured and executed by the French. Many of Pachai Vu's soldiers and strongest supporter either were killed or defected, and went into hiding. And by March of 1921, Pachai Vu left Xianquan province with his most remaining loyal follower, and settled in Muang Kai area in Luang Prabang province, where he lived in a small hut in the dense forest in hiding. As the Hmong folk story told, on November 16, 1922, Pachai Vu, living out of his little hut in the dense forest, heard a tiger roaring, and as he went out to check the surrounding area, he saw a deer pawing the ground, and to him that was a sign that he's going to die. He gave his remaining follower one last order, and that was to bury him on the spot where the deer had pawed, saying that it will guarantee that he would return in 55 years to lead the Hmong again in their struggle for freedom and independence. Many of his remaining follower at that time said he wasn't in his right mind, and that he was talking rubbish, but sure enough, the next day on November 17, 1922, Pachai Vu was assassinated by a pro-French Khmu, and as the madman's war goes, his head was cut off and taken away. His remaining closest follower buried him in Muang Kai and Luang Prabang, exactly where the deer was spotted pawing the ground the following day. In 1959, Xiong Luyang tried to continue Pachai Vu missions, but General Vang Pao ordered his assassination in 1971, and he died nearly 55 years later as Pachai Vu had predicted. The death of Pachai Vu finally brought an end to the war, and his remaining pockets of follower in northern Indochina finally melted away. Father Savina, a priest who witnessed the Hmong rebellion in the Madman War, stated,
"Seeing that the Thai duped the Hmong, and the Hmong did not dupe the Thai, I ask myself why. Seeing that the Thai possessed their own land and were governed by chiefs from their own ethnic group, whereas the Hmong did not possess land, and were obliged to obey foreign chiefs, I asked myself why. Seeing that the Hmong complaints remained unanswered indefinitely in administrative office, I asked myself why. Seeing that some French officials treated the Hmong like stranger, I asked myself why. Seeing that no officials was ever able to or wanted to learn the Hmong language, I asked myself why. Seeing that the Protectorate administration established schools everywhere in Indochina, but never in the Hmong villages, I asked myself why. I have met many officials in my lifetime, but I have never met them on the paths leading to the Hmong villages, I asked myself why. In trying to solve this racial equation which contains several unknowns, I came to know the true causes of the current Hmong uprising. The revolt having broken out openly, we the French could do nothing but defend the Thai and the Lao against the Hmong. As could be foreseen, the Hmong turned themselves immediately against us and the Vietnamese, who accompanied us, which only lengthened the rebellion. Without our intervention, the Hmong would quickly have prevailed over the Thai and the Lao.
After the war ended, the French made sure that there wouldn't be any future Hmong rebellion, and had detachment of Lao and Vietnamese troops stationed in Hmong area, including in Nong Het. The Hmong people were also forced to pay compensation to the Lao, an ethnic Thai people that were deliberately attacked by Pachai Vu army during the war. Over 7,000 silver piastres were collected from the Hmong people to compensate for the war victim of Lao and Thai people. Father Savina will go on to fight on behalf of the Hmong people for the equality in Indochina, saying the Hmong should be allowed to govern themselves like the Lao, Thai, and Vietnamese, and that it was what they had sought to achieve through their revolts. Today Pachai Vu is regarded and hailed as a national hero by the Laos Communist LPDR government. Pachai Vu will go down in history as the Hmong Mad King of the Madman's War. In 1921, Lo Blayo was officially appointed as the new Tossing of Nong Het for his loyalty to the French and his support to fight against Pachai Vu during the war. Li Fang became Lo Blayo personal secretary. Li Fang was Lo Blayo's son-in-law, who married his daughter My Lo. Li Fang and My Lo had two children together, a daughter named Mo Song Li, and a son named Tu Bi Li Fang. Li Fang was an abusive husband, and would abuse his wife constantly, and later also marry a second wife. The domestic violence was so bad, that eventually My Lo couldn't take it anymore, and committed suicide. Lo Blayo blamed his son-in-law for his daughter's death, and out of anger dismissed Li Fang as his secretary. This sparked the feud between the Lo clan and the Li clan. Later, Lo Blayo, still in anger, arrested his son-in-law, Li Fang, and accused him for murder, of killing a Hmong shaman named Lian Nor. Li Fang was put in jail by the French, and spent 6 months in jail until he was released by the French, due to the lack of evidence. In late 1928 Lao Prince Suphanuvong contacted Ho Chi Minh. In October 1930, Prince Suphanuvong included Laos into the ICP Indo-Chinese Communist Party. In 1931, the royal Lao King Sisavangvong of the Lao Kingdom of Luang Prabang ordered the royal Lao troops to occupy Huafan province and officially made it a part of the Kingdom of Luang Prabang. In 1895, the French turned the Vietnamese Huafan province over to the Lao, but they never sent troops and officials to occupy it until 1931. On October 30, 1931, Li Fang accused Tossing Lo Blayo of corruption, and of abusing his power as Tossing and took him to court. Lo Blayo responded by threatening the French that the Hmong would stop paying tribute to the French if they don't drop the case. The French, of not wanting to deal with another Hmong rebellion, gladly comply to Lo Blayo demand and drop the case against him, and allow him to continue being Tossing of Nong Het. In 1934, Lao Communist Committee was formed in Siam. Tossing Lo Blayo remained as Hmong Tossing until his death in 1935 from old age, and his son Sheung Tu Lo became the new Tossing of Nong Het. Sheung Tu Lo, as the new Tossing, neglected his power and duties as the Tossing, and spent most of his days hunting and gambling debts, and stealing some of the tax tribute for himself. The Lao and Vietnamese detachment soldiers stationed at Nong Het also told the French about Sheung Tu Lo's recklessness. By 1938, the French were dissatisfied with Sheung Tu Lo and his incompetence failure as Tossing to deliver his tax tribute collection. By the new year of 1939, Sheung Tu Lo was dismissed of his position as Tossing by the French, and the position was open for the grab.